Tim Burton's take on a classic Lewis Carroll tale finds Alice all grown up, but all is not well in her life. Troubled by oddly familiar dreams that have been with her since childhood, she worries about her sanity, reassured by her father that all the best people are a bit mad. But after losing her father, she finds others controlling and dictating every aspect of her life, much to the detriment of her vivid imagination and curious nature. Whilst running away from an ambush of a marriage proposal, Alice, following a rabbit, falls down a hole and appears in a rather familiar place filled with familiar creatures, the Wonderland of her childhood. Or is it just her imagination running wild again? Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland is a curious blend of sequel and rewrite. Alice is grown up, her life is in a different place, but in many respects this film simply repositions the story into a different time for the character. Opening up with a little exposition in which we see the young Alice recounting what she thinks is a dream, we then find Alice on the way to a party during which she discovers the man that she's partnered with is going to propose. The opening is very much costume drama. The prim and proper folks and formalities are at odds with the wild imagination and almost ADD-like attention span of Alice, who sees the world in an extraordinary light. As Alice runs from the sudden threat of restraint from being married to the most unappealing man in England, she sees a familiar sight in the form of a clothed rabbit carrying a pocket watch. As Alice runs from the sudden threat of restraint from being married to the most unappealing man in England, she sees a familiar sight in the form of a clothed rabbit carrying a pocket watch. Chasing it down, she falls down a rabbit hole and arrives in a room where the familiar routine of drinking and shrinking, eating and growing happen, and old faces are reintroduced, from the all-too-smooth and slightly creepy Cheshire Cat, the decapitation-fixated Red Queen, and the utterly off-kilter Mad Hatter. In true Tim Burton style, this world is a skewed place. Ironically, the most terrifying characters are actually the good guys. The Cheshire Cat is deeply unsettling. Its smooth, measured voice is almost like a voice from within a madman's mind, disembodied, persuasive, dark, and of dubious motivation. The Mad Hatter seems scarily on the edge of psychotic behaviour, his actions and words being of a deeply fractured, bizarre, and rather random nature. And the March Hare looks like some sort of zombie. He reminded me very strongly of Watership Down's villains. On the bad guy side, we had the surprisingly fun and whimsical Red Queen, a figurehead that has strong parallels with Elizabeth I from the Blackadder series. Considering her penchant for decapitation as the first recourse to solving her disputes with, well, pretty much anyone, she's actually the most fun character in the entire movie. The blurring of CG in live action does give solidity to the characters, and the most outlandish performances are in turn enhanced by the freedom that the virtual world affords. The vibrant and deeply eccentric world of Wonderland is visually exciting and interesting, and in combination with the characters, again I'm specifically thinking of the good guys, we're presented with a place that, as eccentric as it is, also carries a dark streak that runs right through it. The swamp, for instance, that Alice crosses using dead-head stepping stones, is a particularly unnerving and disturbing image that really carries a grim and foreboding tone to it. The casting is rather good. Johnny Depp, doing his usual good job of appearing anything but normal, is slightly menacing while being likeable as the Mad Hatter. You always feel like he's on the edge of doing something quite terrible, but he never quite lets it happen. Helena Bonham Carter is highly entertaining as the selfish and brattish Red Queen, who can actually have a bit of sympathy for as she laments her lack of love and the ridicule that her large head earns her. In what can easily end up being a very shallow character, Helena Bonham Carter finds enough depth in the Queen to make her more than just an object of dislike. The supporting cast, in the form of the likes of Michael Sheen, Matt Lucas, Timothy Spall, and many others, most notably Alan Rickman as the wise stoner caterpillar, who dispenses his opinion in bizarrely measured tempo, and Stephen Fry as the iconic Cheshire Cat, whose manner is as odd as his physical attributes. Mia Wasikowska, after what seemed like a slightly shaky start, soon settles into the role of the hyper-imaginative Alice, and she does a good job of portraying someone who seems to be stuck in a dream world. There is a feeling of the lines being often forced, and I'm not sure if the performance was hindered by the rather prim English accent she does, and possibly to some part maybe the virtual world that she had to perform in. This said, she does put the effort in and is likeable. Certainly she looks perfect for the role. Alice in Wonderland doesn't pander to the younger audience. Like the classic fairy tales, it has enough elements that may frankly terrify the more sensitive child, and possibly one or two who are not so sensitive. The characters have Tim Burton's trademark dark edge, and they're all ambiguous in nature in a way that doesn't often happen in the likes of a Disney film, where the norm would be to have very clear-cut characters of black and white virtue. The tale's moral is something you see coming a mile off. In fact, you end up deliberately watching the development of it during the film, but that's okay, yes, it's meant for the younger audience. It's at least not an entirely trite subtext to the movie, and seeing the development of Alice throughout the story is fairly satisfying, even if the conclusion of that development is rather obvious. The themes of growing up, responsibility, and taking control of your life are strong and play to a degree where they're bold enough for the younger viewer to see, but not so bludgeoning as to irritate the older viewer, as is often the case with a Disney film. This is a film that can play well across the age range. It's spectacular to look at, the cast is solid, and the story has enough going on for all kinds of viewers to enjoy. Like so many films of this nature, it's worth catching on the big screen.